Hi everyone. This week I wanted to try to do something a little bit different and see if it's something we're going to continue in the future. My name is Bruce, aka the PlaidPagan.
And I'm Becky. I'm his little sister. And today what we want to do is our GUADCAST, and we're going to be doing it as a brother-sister kind of dynamic duo and take on some horror subjects. So today, go ahead.
Yeah, so we wanted to start with something a little... So today we want to talk about two films that we both feel very differently about. We're going to be looking at Perkins' films, Blackcoat's Daughter and I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in This House. For us, we have very different opinions on specifically Pretty Thing.
Yeah.
I don't like it so much.
And that hurts.
But I'm a big fan of Blackcoat. A little introduction for us just before we get started. I come from a creative writing background, and Becky...
I come from a background of journalism and videography and photography, so I kind of bring a little bit of a different kind of concept to the approach of critiquing.
Yeah, so we have like completely different ways, not completely different, but we watch films a little differently.
Yeah, we like to think it's kind of a good balance, right?
Yeah. I tend to be more story atmospheric driven, and you tend to be more like, these cuts suck. Or
like, look at this camera, it's kind of visual, look how wonderful it is.
So we in that sense we both have a little bit of a different viewpoint on how films work. We're going to start with, I think we'll probably just jump around a little bit. I think that'll probably be...
I think so.
Yeah, because there's so many similarities between these films.
There's a lot of parallels that we draw on,
I think there's a lot of that we can talk about, that we can jump back and forth. So, you want to start, and then we'll kind of go from there, or...?
Well, I guess, yeah, sure. So I think maybe we could start with the Blackcoat's Daughter, because it was his first film, right?
Yeah.
So
technically released second, but filmed first.
Right, absolutely. So maybe we can kind of talk about, let's say, like, what's Perkins' style, right? So we know right off the bat, okay, so he's a really kind of slow burn, atmospheric horror teller, right? But he does it from a very kind of diluted sense of storytelling, right? So what would you say to that? Like,
yeah, I think a lot of times in horror critiquing and like the horror community in general, the word pretentious tends to get thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel like some people might apply that to his films. I personally don't feel that way, and I think pretension is a little bit of an overused word anyway.
I agree.
It's kind of become like a dirty word.
Yeah.
You know, and like I hear a lot of people say the Lighthouse is pretentious. I mean,
it may be a little, but that's for another time.
But with these, I don't think they're pretentious.
No.
They are very slow, dread-inducing films.
Yeah, definitely. And going off of that as well, we talk about the type of videography in cinema that he uses along with the slow burn. It's very artsy, it's very beautiful. Sometimes it's actually like looking at a piece of art.
For sure.
Yeah, the shots are gorgeous, and there's so many of those long shots of just darkness in the subject, and it's eerie and unsettling. Like you said, there's like this sense of constant dread and like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Even though it's a slow burn, you're still like feeling intense from it, I find.
Yeah, and I think because of the style that he does, kind of going less of a more traditional horror with like these jump scare tension releases.
Yeah.
Because you don't really get a whole lot of release until the very end. So both of these movies, you kind of, if you're paying attention, and you're kind of getting into it, and you'll know real quick watching these movies if like they're for you or not. You know about 20 minutes in, you'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people find that these movies a little too sleepy.
They do, and I've heard a lot of people say that he has a bit of a minimalistic way of telling a story.
He has very few actors in his films and very few locations, specifically in The Pretty Thing. I mean, it's all in one house.
Yeah, I guess, but I feel like I actually kind of disagree with that notion.
Well, sometimes less is more, right?
Yeah, and I like the fact that it's not necessarily a simple setting, but it's more like an intimate setting, right?
Yeah.
And I personally found with I'm the Pretty Thing That Lives, or The Little Pretty Thing That Lives in This House, I personally found that it wasn't minimalistic storytelling. Like, it's so complex. Like, you listen to the dialogue. There's so much dialogue to really take in and digest.
Yeah, I guess, like, actual plot-wise, though, there's not a whole lot there. Like,
and that would be the slow burn, I suppose.
Yeah, like, both movies kind of have a point that they want to make, and then that's it. And they mostly focus on building up that dread. But yes, there is a lot of stuff to digest, specifically with Pretty Thing. There's a lot of content in that movie.
Yeah.
And they, even when we were talking yesterday a little bit before doing the show, is that, like, we both took completely different views even on that Pretty Thing. We both just had completely different views on what that movie is.
We really did. Yeah, and I think they're both completely, perfectly fine ways to digest a story. And that's one of the great things about Perkins, is that he kind of leaves some of the storytelling for you to figure out. He'll give you some of the tools and the elements, and then you're just kind of piecing things together.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a fun experience in
that
way.
Yeah, and I think that's that's definitely intentional, and that's why we each took away different aspects of it.
100%.
I think we pretty much aligned with Blackcoat. Excuse me.
Right, yeah, let's talk about Blackcoat. Go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, I think we pretty much agreed with Blackcoat being, for me, the movie, it's even actually on the posters that abandoned as a child, raised by the darkness or something. Right. Raised by the dark. So for me, like, the film is definitely about abandonment. Like, you get that sense pretty much straight away. It shows her being disconnected from her surroundings, from the rest of the school. With it starting with her parents being dead, like, straight away, you immediately get this sense that she's alone, even though she's still... And because the movie takes place in February, I believe it's February, because that was the original name of the film.
Exactly,
during the school break, and her parents aren't there because they've died, she's alone in this school, and the sense of looming dread is all around her.
Right, the atmosphere again, right?
Yeah, and he's very good at, like, you see these scenes where the parents are meeting their kids, and they're all driving away, and she's still standing there, and nothing's going on, right? She's waiting.
And right away you feel alone. You feel this character, Kat, and you're like, the sense of loneliness and abandonment. Like, she's watching all of her friends leave with their parents, and she's waiting on her parents. And at the beginning we have that scene, and we don't know if it's an intuitive dream or maybe demonic induced kind of vision about her parents dying in a crash, right?
Yeah.
So right away we already feel kind of like, oh, we feel lonely, like this girl, she feels abandoned, and right away it sets the tone for the movie.
Yeah, it really does, and like, it keeps coming back to that loneliness, even though it's intercut with the other character, Joan, which, just as a heads up, if you haven't seen either of these movies, we are going to talk about spoilers. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, that's probably something, if you want to watch either of these films, go do that first, and then come back, because, there's a lot of, we have to. These movies are so,
they're so in-depth, they're so dynamic.
Yeah, there's so much going on that we have to talk about at the end.
Yeah.
So
let's get back to Blackcoat's daughter. So you're talking about the abandonment and the loneliness, right?
Yeah.
So do you get the sense that this type of abandonment, not only does she feel from the what is it, the headmaster of the school,
I think it's a headmaster.
Yeah, and I think he's
Father
a priest.
Something or other. I can't remember his name.
So he's leaving, and she's already upset that he's not coming to her talent show, right? So right away, okay, she's upset about that. She's abandoned.
She's kind of latching onto him right away from like this dream that she's had.
Exactly, and then we know her parents don't show up. We know everyone's leaving. The only one who's left is this other girl. I forget her name. But
Rose, I think.
Maybe, yeah.
Rose?
She's the older.
I can't remember. I thought I wrote it down in my notes, but I can't remember her name. I think it's Rose.
And she's older. I think she's maybe a year or two older than her, but they're all at the same school nonetheless.
Yeah.
And she's actually appointed to be her head, or by the headmaster, to be her guardian.
So yeah, I think it leads right into this scene where it's intercut a little bit, and I always get them mixed up because the movie kind of blends together for me, because of the way it tells its story. It kind of seems like it reorganizes at the end.
Right, because it's two timelines together. You don't really know it to the end.
But even like it goes back and shows these scenes with her in the bath and stuff. Like, you see that scene earlier, but then later on in the movie you see the same scene, but that demon figure is standing in the room.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the film, I don't know if it's necessarily, for me it was kind of like, is it a demonic possession, or is it like I I guess it is a demonic possession.
That's what I took away from
Yeah,
it.
because he exorcises her and everything too.
Right, so how I felt is that the agent of possession by the devil or a demon or what have you, I think it's probably the demon, even though she says Hail Satan, which is awesome.
Hail Satan.
But I think the fact that she's so alone and feeling abandoned is really the agent of possession for this character.
Yeah.
Right? So let's talk about her possession, because this is not a typical demonic possession film. Like, we've seen things like The Exorcist and all those kinds of, like, the possession of so-and-so, right?
Yeah.
And these are just crazy films of what happened typically to these female characters, right, when they're possessed. The Cat did not go through this.
Yeah, it feels a little bit more like Rosemary's Baby in that sense, where like there's a demonic thing going on, but it's more about the character's descent and like what's happening.
And not
there.
necessarily the possession itself. Yeah, I would agree.
Not that I'm not trying to directly compare the two films because they're very different, but that kind of idea is it's not so much, it's not, whereas The Exorcist is more of a spectacle of her puking and everything. That's not what we get in this film.
Yeah, it's more, exactly. The Exorcist is about Pazuzu, the actual entity demon that's possessed her,
Whereas this is more focused on her abandonment specifically.
Right, and so what do we know from watching her get possessed on screen? What happens to her? We see these kind of creepy scenes.
Yeah.
Where, like, the one in the bed, you tell it better than me.
Yeah, well, the whole... For me, it's just... I think it's great because she's just laying there in the bed. I think this is the second like possession scene we see.
I think so, yeah.
Because the first one is her like worshiping the and she's just like going ham and worshiping
because the girl comes back and she's like, it's like this Freddy Krueger boiler room and she's like going ham at it.
Yeah.
I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, so, and it's just so, she's so snappy with it, and it's like fluid. And then later on, we see this other scene where she's laying on the bed face down, and like her legs come backwards over her head. Yeah, but there's no, what makes it so, again, whereas you would get like that snapping frame action from like The Exorcist or something like that. This one, it's just a fluid single motion and there's no sound. It's just, you just see her legs come out and over her head.
And that's what made it so unsuspecting, because you're like, there wasn't that kind of creepy music in that regard that would suggest this kind of awkward demon possession. And then all of a sudden, we're like, what the fuck?
But what I liked so much about Blackcoat's Daughter is it doesn't play its scary scenes as jump scares.
Right,
because in another movie that would have been like, you know, and like would have scared the shit out of you. Whereas this, it doesn't do that. It stays quiet, and then it just fluidly does this motion, and it brings out it. Yeah, I have dogs. If you haven't caught on to it from my other videos, but
lots of bubs.
Yeah, so.
So talking about her demonic possession, so the idea that she's feeling abandoned and alone makes her, I think, personally susceptible to possession. But it's not just that, it's almost as if she actually welcomes it because she's seeking some kind of comfort.
Yeah.
She's comforted by her possession.
I also think that the idea was kind of put into her head by the other girl, Rose, because she starts talking about this nuns worshiping the devil and all this shit. So maybe like it was something that wasn't quite on her mind, and then she thinks like, oh, this is I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing.
And I like that you bring up the rumors that she was talking about, because in the end, how does the headmaster know to exorcise Cat in the most like simplest form of exorcism we've probably ever seen in a movie, right? And how would he know to jump to such a crazy conclusion in sense? Is because, well, not every, like, why would you just assume that she's demonically possessed unless there was some kind of actual fact to the rumors? Right?
Yeah. Well, it was like you were saying yesterday when we were talking about it. It's like, but that scene in particular, usually in an exorcism movie, we have like some resistance from the church. They don't want to openly accept or go jump right on the whole it's a possession bandwagon.
Right, we need proof, we need time.
Yeah, they want to look into it, they want more evidence, they need approval from higher ups in the church. So and then all of a sudden in this, maybe he got those things, but it doesn't show those, and I think it doesn't show them for a reason. It just cuts right to him. And
I like that because, again, it's that sense of time that we're not really understanding, because there's no, like, oh, today's today, today's tomorrow. It just kind of happens, and all of a sudden she's in a bed being exercised. And it's kind of like Pretty Thing, right? We don't always know the time that's elapsing.
Yeah,
right?
the movies are very obscure with their time framing.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's a deliberate choice,
Right.
even with Blackcoat, because it's jumping. To me, the twist, I saw it coming. Like, I don't think it was really that big of a surprise. Like,
Okay, so what gave it away for you?
yeah, so so at the very beginning of the movie, there's this scene where she's talking with the headmaster, and then she just starts giggling for like no reason, and then he's, Kat's like, oh, nothing, and the headmaster's like, why are you laughing? What's so funny, right?
Right.
And then later we have a similar scene with Joan, and she does the same thing. She just starts
in the bathroom.
Yeah, she just starts laughing
At
for
the
like
picture, yeah.
literally no reason. And for me, that was the first like, oh, they're the same fucking person.
Right, because I guess at first the idea is to make you think it's two separate, or not two separate timelines. It kind of seems like Joan is riding with Rose's parents to go pick up Rose from break, right? And then you realize, oh shit, it's not. It's different timelines.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, you're right, it wasn't a huge surprise, but it's a neat element, I thought. Right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. This is gonna kind of lead us towards the ending. What did you think of that monumental ending? I personally loved it. I thought it was such like a unique way to end it, because we feel like as if the movie in the story of Kat or / Joan wasn't actually complete. What did you take away from that?
So are you like referring to like the very, very end, or like the climax?
No, the very, very end where she's just screaming in the street.
Oh,
Why?
I think that was like, that's the perfect embodiment of what the film's trying to show, is this whole abandonment story. So like even at the end, her demonic entity that was possessing her has abandoned her. Like,
right.
So that's why she just cries and starts losing it, because she's literally completely alone and abandoned. She has nothing.
That's exactly how
And she's done all of this murder and mayhem to appease this entity, and like it doesn't come back to her.
And honestly, I don't think that she felt any remorse for the murders. I don't think that's what this screaming or the crying in the end was about.
Oh no, absolutely not.
She killed Rose's parents, and to her it kind of seemed like a higher power at work here. She killed the daughter, and all of a sudden she's hitchhiking with the parents. She's thinking, there's some kind of higher power connection, perhaps, that we're supposed to think, or that maybe Kat and Joan are thinking, right? But I do like how she does kill them, and she takes them back to the boiler room.
Yeah.
Cuts their heads off, right? And she puts their heads there like she did with the nuns in Rose previously. And her sacrifice isn't accepted. And so again, she's feeling abandoned. She's feeling alone. So that final scene is her realizing, fuck, I'm alone, and it's hard. Like, she broke out of a mental institution to seek the comfort of the demon who possessed her, and he rejected her. So that's what I took away.
I definitely prefer Blackcoat's Daughter. I think it's a better film. That's just my opinion, but I feel more upset in that movie. Well, I guess like upset. I'm saying like the ending has a stronger effect on me, whereas with Pretty Thing, I'm just watching it like, what the fuck did I just watch? But with Blackcoat, I'm like, oh fuck. Like she's a shit person too, though. But you still feel bad for her. I think, like I did. Like you still like I felt bad for her. Like.
Yeah, she was kind of like a weird character. She had like no emotion on her face. I guess like we kind of mentioned this before, like the actual acting wasn't so much in the dialogue, but how they portrayed the emotion or lack thereof of emotion on the face, and she just seems so friggin' like dead in her eyes, like look into my dead lights.
And that progressively gets worse as she becomes more not more possessed, but like more under the influence of the entity or the demon or the Satan. I don't think we ever really know what exactly is going on. We do know that it's a demonic presence of some kind.
And the image, actually, we should mention that briefly. Even the image of the demonic entity is very obscure. It's literally like, what would you describe it? Horns and like a fuzzy black blanket.
Like it's like it almost looked like
cool.
It looked like donkey ears, and like it's just a shadow basically, but it was like donkey's ears like standing straight up. Usually when I didn't take horns from that, because usually when you see like, I don't know, maybe that's the idea, because usually when they depict demonic horns, they're more goat or ram like, and these were just kind of like these were all, like straight up more like I guess like goats have the straight horns as well, but you know what I mean, like the larger horns.
Like they're more like the antler almost. It's actually talking about that scene when she's laying in the hospital bed. What does she say to the demon? she says, "Don't leave me," right?
Mm.
So right away, like, as she's being exercised, I just wanted to briefly mention that because I thought it was a really powerful scene.
Yeah.
She's like, "Don't leave me." I'm like, oh my God, like, she's legitimately comforted by this
That's all
demon.
she's hanging on to, yeah.
And you see all these movies and you hear these stories about people who are tormented by demons, and yet this girl finds comfort in her possession.
Yeah.
So it's such a unique demonic possession story.
Yeah.
So I think what we can do, because I liked how you said that you actually felt bad for this character. So I kind of want to segue with that into Pretty Thing, because I felt bad for the women in this movie. I strongly feel like this movie is about the female psyche and the different traumas that women experience. So we look at Polly, who I would say is a symbolism of domestic abuse, right? And we look at another form of female trauma with Lily, I think her name is, right? Lily?
The main character, yeah.
The nurse? Yeah. And she seems to be so isolated. You know, she was engaged before. She's no longer engaged. She's come to this house to be a hospice nurse, which is a very isolating kind of job for a young woman to do, right? And then we have
and she's fearful of a lot of things. The movie makes a point of pointing out,
and she's always calling herself, "Oh, I'm just, don't be such a silly Billy, like, don't be so afraid, I scare too easy," right?
Yeah.
So we know she's a little bit of a goofy character, but I think it's still charming.
Kind of reminded me of like a more wholesome version of shit from Misery.
Oh,
Annie Wilkes.
Yeah, Annie Wilkes.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me, like, the same kind
She's not
of...
as crazy as...
Yeah, but just the same kind of, like, dialogue, like, the way she talks, like, silly Billy and stuff like that. Yeah, she said, like, dirty bird and shit like that, you know what I mean? Like,
there's the same kind of language, definitely.
Yeah, like, I don't know what the hell that is.
I thought it was charming, and I guess it was maybe... unnecessary or not, but
it's a time thing. Obviously, it's just for me. It's weird.
Okay, fair enough. I thought it was kind of cute. You think it's weird? That's fine. Anyways, I want to say about the trauma. I think that Iris Blum represents, because I say this. I think it's specifically about the female psyche and the trauma, and I think that she represents something of aging. Like, she is. Women often in the 19th century were regarded as pretty little things to men.
Mm-hmm.
When they weren't married because they weren't pretty little things, often they became spinsters or worked in brothels or something. Like they had to be a pretty thing to get noticed. And I think that Iris Blum is one example of something or again, a trauma of a woman aging and no longer being that pretty little thing. And we also kind of realize that she was never married. She has like a kind of a Shirley Jackson thing going on about her, about this really renowned, prolific horror writer, right? So that's how I digested the three women, right? I thought they really represented the female psyche and the trauma.
You mentioned when we were talking yesterday, you mentioned the trauma as well. That's a slightly different message than what I got. I did get the feminist message. That's pretty on the nose. It's not done in an obnoxious way, though, and I think that it does it in a more artistic and tasteful way. Sometimes it's just
I agree.
Yeah. Sometimes when they're trying to approach political or social subject matter, it's a little too blunt.
I don't want to cut you off, but I'm passionate about this. But that's the one thing about Perkins I really love, is that he can, as a man, he can tell female stories about female trauma and be a feminist without the overly political agenda of, hey, I'm a feminist, I care more about fuck men, hate men, other than I want my equality, I'm a great woman, this is what I can do, these are my strengths and capabilities. And we kind of mentioned this before, and that's
like when I was shitting on the Black Christmas remake.
Yeah. Well, because I don't think feminism, and this could be very controversial, but I think feminism should be about equality, not tearing down other people, but building women up.
Yeah, right? I agree.
And I think that Perkins does such a beautiful job, and it's such a relief, it's such a breath of fresh air to have a man who can actually understand how to portray feminism without, either making fun of it, mocking it, or like over exaggerating it. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what we talked yesterday about, like female roles always having to be like leather clad or
right,
like
you have to be able to wield a
kick-ass
katana
assassin
and
or some shit
kill
like
zombies.
that. Yeah, like they got to be like Laura Croft or like Alice from
Yeah,
or Kate
or
Beckinsale
Kate
from Underworld. Like, that's the role they have to be in order, and
Celine
like,
and Alice.
yeah. And like I know, like we see men roles that aren't like that. So like, what's the big deal with women being in roles that aren't like that?
Right, because women don't need to be powerful and beautiful
to be a protagonist.
Yeah, exactly. They can just be regular women. Just like a guy doesn't have to have abs to be like a hero in someone's eyes. You know what I mean? I know that's a bit of a trivial comparison, but it's still kind of the same principle.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyways, getting back to this, so I wanted to mention. What do you think about the idea of the house? Okay, so right off the bat, we know, okay, I'll just quickly say this. We know it's like a ghost story told from within a ghost story. We already know the house is haunted.
Yeah, right away, yeah.
We know that. And again, it's atmospheric horror, it's a slow burn, right? There's this looming sense of death. Right away she says, I will not live to be 29 years old. We know she's going to die, so we're waiting. There's that dread, that intensity that builds up. We're waiting for her to die. She doesn't know when she's going to die. What do you think of the house, which I kind of thought represented the female psyche, like the house itself? What do you think of it being like kind of a purgatory? We have one woman who's dead, one woman who's going to die because she's got dementia, she's aging. We have another woman who's kind of trapped in limbo right now. We know she's going to die, but she shouldn't be dying because she's a healthy young woman, ideally. So what do you think of that?
I think that if we're going to talk spiritual afterlives, that I think it's more attuned to like a limbo type situation, like waiting for the judgment. Whereas with purgatory specifically, there's generally a place of atonement. So I think in the sense of it being purgatory, it's something they would have all had to have done something wrong in their lives.
That's a good point.
If we're going from a like a Christian viewpoint on the subject,
right? And we don't know why Polly was murdered. Maybe she had an affair, but I mean, maybe the engagement broke off with Lily because something happened. You never know, right?
Yeah. But with it being a purgatory specifically, that realm of the afterlife would be of the Christian viewpoint afterlife, Catholic specifically.
Right.
But that viewpoint, I think, would come from something that they did something that they need to atone for. Whereas limbo,
that's a good point,
would be kind of waiting to be sent to wherever they need to go, right? Because so generally, I mean, I'm basing all of this off the Divine Comedy. I'm not a Catholic.
Hey, it's a good stuff.
And I know it's fiction, but like a lot of film mythology surrounding that afterlife idea generally comes from the Divine Comedy.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that it would be more of a quote, like limbo type situation than actually purgatory. But I do I guess
you're right. That's so much more appropriate now that you say it.
I do like that idea. That is not what I got from it though.
So what did you get from it then?
For me,
did you think that? Sorry, I don't want to like speak for you. But
no, it's just so for me. One, I didn't really like this. It's not because it's a feminist movie. I think
it's just too complex for you.
It might be. But then again, like, cosmic horror is my favorite genre. So there can be some pretty existential crisis going on in those that I seem to get. But this one, I'm not sure what it is. And maybe it's just it's because it's so slow. I don't know. Anyway, I can't put my finger on it. I will say this, the first time I watched it, I fucking hated this movie. And I was like, no way. And then when...
And what did I say? What the fuck? Rewatch it.
Yeah.
Seriously?
So I rewatched it. I felt better about it the second time. Still not a big fan of it. Probably wouldn't watch it again. And honestly, if you hadn't have wanted to talk about Perkins on this episode, I probably wouldn't have rewatched it at all. But I am glad I did, because I took away something completely different, and the film kind of segues from, it starts showing like it's going to do this, and then it switches gears, and maybe because they switched the gears it pissed me off, and that's why I didn't like it, but I can't really say 100% what it is. But I was thinking that the film was being written by the author in like the first person the whole time. So she's like she's the pretty thing in the wall that's writing this story, and and she's the one telling this. So yeah, that's how I thought that's what the direction it was going, and then it kind of seems like it, and then all of a sudden it switches gears to the whole thing with the estate manager showing up and locking the door and finding the dead bodies, and then it kind of totally derailed my theory. But that was how I initially took the film.
Okay, so I like that idea. I think abstractly from the beginning, that's a really solid place to start with digesting this story, because we know that she's a horror writer, and we know that she keeps mistaking Lily for Polly. So we think that, okay, like, is Iris Blum, like, is she reflecting on the story of what happened to this woman in the walls, right? So we feel like as an audience that she's telling the story of Polly, and when I first watched this film, admittedly, I thought that Lily was Polly and that she was going to get murdered and be put in the wall. That's actually how I thought it was going to play out.
Yeah,
right?
so the first time I watched it, that's what I thought too.
Exactly, and that's how I thought it was going. And then I realized, this is not how it's going at all.
Yeah.
And remember, I think I mentioned it to you before, because we talked about this before. Remember the book, the mid-19th century book called The Yellow Wallpaper?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that, because I was just going to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we talked a little bit about that yesterday when we were preparing on comparing notes and stuff.
Let me just briefly sum it up for our listeners. Actually.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So in the 19th century, it was quite common for women to go through some kinds of physical and mental trauma, right? And a lot of times the way that this kind of depression and anxiety and mental health were actually approached and treated was to have their husbands just like, well, why don't you just sit in a room and write a book or embroider something, or, like, it was just this really, like, lame stigma of, like, women can't do anything, just leave them at home while the man goes to work. We just lock her in the door, the master key at the end of the movie, let's just lock him in there and then let's leave, right? So the idea is that she's writing a book through journals. So she starts focusing on the four walls, and she sees this yellow wallpaper, and she's picking out, like, these very intricate designs in it, to the point where eventually she starts to see that there's, like, a woman crawling in the yellow wallpaper, and she thinks that she has to set this woman free. So she feels like the woman's communing with her, so she, like, essentially starts just, like, ripping down the yellow wallpaper, trying to, like, free this woman. And then in the end, and this is all through her journals, right? And in the end, the husband comes home and sees her, like, going crazy around the room, and eventually she, like, she believed that she became the woman in the walls, and she's like, I'm free, like, she, like, attacks him and, like, runs out. And of course I'm paraphrasing what she says, but that's kind of what I thought what the Pretty Thing was kind of drawing parallels with, is that, she saw this woman in the walls, Polly's the woman in the walls, and, it's about, like, the women feeling isolated and trapped within the four walls.
Now, yeah, I when you mentioned that yesterday, it was something that I had thought kind of about, but not. Right. But when you had brought it up, and then we had that little discussion, it was definitely. I can definitely see where the parallels are being drawn there, almost to, like, a way that it's kind of a telling of the same story in a way.
Yeah, and I thought there was a little bit of symbolism hinting to the yellow wallpaper, because the actual movie opens up, and then I'm pretty sure the last scene too, with the nurse wearing the yellow sweater. And because everything else she wears is white, it kind of, from what I remember, and then all of a sudden this, like, kind of, like, yellow sweater that just kind of stands out from her wardrobe, and I thought perhaps that was a bit of symbolism that, yes, it's the yellow wallpaper. But I mean, that's just my take. Like, I don't actually know what Perkins, if that was his intention or not, but I thought it was kind of a perspective that was neat. I don't know, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean,
like the yellow wallpaper.
Yeah, I think the comparison. The
four walls.
Putting it in that way, I think it was interesting, and it's not after you had mentioned that, it's definitely the way. Definitely helped me see it that way, and I think it's a good tribute or inspiration, I guess, to the work.
Especially when you're telling a feminism story, and then you take an actual story written by a female that suffered these traumas that I mentioned earlier on, and they kind of retell that story through three different characters, right? But yeah, so actually, I'm kind of jumping around here, but the idea of her being trapped in the four walls. So we talked about how the Blackcoat's daughter seemed a lot like abandonment and loneliness, and then I felt like with Pretty Thing, there was this sense of, like, the same kind of dread and the waiting for death, right? But I also thought that where Blackcoat's daughter was about the abandonment, Pretty Thing was really much about like the isolation.
Yeah.
The four walls, like just
100%.
feeling trapped in the wall, feeling trapped in the four walls of the house. Like, how did you feel watching that?
Well, definitely. So for me, there's a couple of things that I saw right away. One was the score and the ambience of the film. There's just constant outside sound, like the crickets and the rain and all these other things, but we never see it outside. It's always, everything's filmed inside the house, except for the few scenes that are from like the front of the house.
Yeah.
Like we even, you pointed out yesterday, it even cuts right into open of the movie with her in the house. We never really,
we don't really see her outside.
Yeah, the house is the setting, right?
Yeah.
So, there's so many shots where she's the only thing illuminated in the picture.
Right.
Like, so there's like these, there's quite a few shots that are like from down a hallway and it's all black, like it's pitch black around her. You don't actually know where, you could be filming it from a hole, like you can't tell where you are.
Yeah.
But the door frames her in wherever she is, and there's quite a few shots like that where she is being framed in blackness or darkness and shadow.
And it's such a nice contrast that Perkins uses of light and dark.
Yeah.
So we always see Lily in the light, and then all the darkness is behind her. What's lurking in the darkness? Well, we know that Polly is there, right? And so I think that's kind of a good segue into another idea I had about this film that I want to share with you. Is what do you think about the fact that when Iris Blum tells Lily, even though she's constantly confusing her for Polly, making us confused about who's who, right? She keeps saying, you continue to turn your back so much that eventually your feet started facing the wrong way. And I'm like, I'm thinking, what the F? Like, it really made me feel uneasy. It was like disturbing to me because I felt the film was like so unsettling, just always seeing her in the light. And then we have these really bizarre images, like please tell me, what the fuck is with this chair?
The fucking chair on the wall.
Right? And the whole time I'm begging her, I'm like, please notice this chair.
It's so distracting. Like, what the fuck is with this chair upside down on the goddamn wall?
She never notices it, just like...
It's like some ring shit.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
With the freaking chair spinning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I couldn't believe why she never noticed it. But then I realized, like, she never notices really even when the phone's pulled out of her hand. She doesn't really react like we would all be like, what the fuck?
Yeah, she thinks she tripped on it or something. Yeah.
And she...
Okay, no, because she says the cord, I guess the cord's not as long as I thought it was.
Oh, right, that's what she said, yeah.
Yeah, she just thinks that she walked out of range and it was yanked from just running out of length.
Even though she's sitting before the wall with the fucking chair on it, right? So she's kind of giving herself excuses to not accept the fact that the house is haunted. She knows it is, but she doesn't want to think about it because she's too scared to acknowledge the haunt that's in this house.
Yeah, and
right?
Like you were saying before about the whole about the turning around, it's symbolic to the willful ignorance of both the characters. Like they want to not of Polly and Lily. They're not paying attention, or like not that they're not paying attention. They're willfully not noticing these things.
Right.
Specifically Lily, but it's because we see Polly with the turned around feet. That still comes back to my theory that they're the same person. But like, Well,
let's get to that.
Yeah.
So first of all, let's talk about how perhaps they're willfully blind. So maybe that's the blindfold, the literal blindfold is symbolism of not seeing your death. Her husband murders her. She doesn't see it because she's blindfolded, right? And then we see that Lily doesn't see her own death because she doesn't see her own death lurking. Because she's so afraid to look into this darkness and accept that, fuck, I'm actually being haunted. She knows, she just doesn't want to acknowledge it to herself, right? And that's where you see Perkins really use that contrast of light and dark. So like you said, Lily's in a lit up room. The only light we see is when she's in a room. Everything else behind us, like these friggin' void black hallways that are just so like I was fucking scared by. I'm like, oh my god, like I can never look at a doorway the same. And I was actually terrified. And you're like, I wasn't scared. I was like, the fuck, I wasn't. I was so scared.
Well, like, it's funny you said, because for me, those scenes are in Blackcoat's Daughter, where it's just these scenes of her like talking on the phone,
The long hallway shot.
Yeah, and these just empty school halls.
It's
you know?
so creepy.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, and it's not done. You don't think the school's haunted. Like, there's no ghosts in the school. It's just, I don't know. Specifically, like I was saying yesterday, for me, schools were oppressive. It's like I don't like schools. I think like the social structures and things like that that's a whole nother political social rant.
It truly is.
But for me, that particular shooting like that was so like what you're saying, like you thought the door was like the blank void was what was for you, and for me it was just that lonely hallways of like emptiness, like so I guess they're kind of similar, but like they hit us on the same nerve, but from different images, which is interesting.
That's why you go towards, and I love Blackcoat's Daughter, but I think I prefer Pretty Things just because I kind of run home with it more, just like you with Blackcoat's Daughter. Right? And I
Plus, I love Emma Roberts.
Emma Roberts is so amazing, right?
Yeah.
I was so impressed when I saw her in this movie. I was like, damn, this girl, she can act.
Yeah. I loved her in American Horror Story. Yeah.
I think the sassy.
Even though her character's even though her charter's a bitch.
Or in Scream Queens, like she's such a sassy bitch, but she does it so well. She's so fun to watch. But getting back to, I can't help but jump around. There's
so much comparison. Yeah, you have to.
But I really want to talk a little bit about the cinematography with Pretty Thing, right? So like I was saying, we see the black doorways. We see Lily lit in a room before it. And Lily always has her back turned to the darkness, right? Just like the ghost turned her back. Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
And what happens, like Lily leaves the scene. She refused to look into the darkness. But what does Perkins do? He does it for us. He looks into the darkness for us. So he zooms the camera very slowly into this darkness, and what does it reveal? It reveals a haunting that Polly's a ghost. She's there. It reveals a haunting that Lily's not acknowledging. So she can't see her own death coming because she won't acknowledge it. And it's like I said, the blindfolds too. She didn't see her death coming because she was blindfolded, right? So I thought that was kind of another like really dynamic way of telling this ghost story instead of just making it, I guess, like a feminist story, right? It really sold the fact that, oh my God, there's this looming sense of death, and we don't know when it's going to happen because our main character seems so aloof to everything around her. She can't even notice a chair on the fucking wall.
I think, like, for me, it's like both movies are so oppressive. Like, you just feel them. Like, I think of Fantasia. I forget the exact the exact bit, but the animation where you've got like the devil figure over the mountain, and he's just like and like that's how those movies feel. Like you're the mountain, and he's just like looming over you. It's just this sense of like it's just an oppressive film. Like you feel small underneath the weight of this situation, because both movies kind of introduce you to their supernatural elements pretty quickly.
Right away.
But they never really pay off until the very end, right?
There's a few payoffs in Pretty Thing, right? Where you see like the phone cord kind of snap out of her hand, and you see like the reflection in the TV, and like the kind of abrupt music.
Yeah,
right?
But
they're very.
But again, I think Pretty Thing has a jump scare in it though, doesn't it? With the TV.
Yep.
I think that's the only jump scare in all three. All three. I can't help but think about Gretel and Hansel. I know,
yeah. We're gonna get there eventually on another episode, but there's so much to discuss in these three films, right?
Yeah.
But I liked how you were kind of. Sorry, I didn't mean to like change topics again. It's so hard to just because there's so much to draw on each film. But with that sense of like the jump scares, right? When I'm looking into the TV, I was expecting a jump scare, and I was actually happy that I got one. I was like, oh, cool. Like, that was like one of the few things I actually was expecting, and you kind of got that satisfaction, I thought. But
so, I guess we can kind of talk about the the deaths in these movies, because, I mean...
Go ahead.
Pretty Thing, I was like...
You hate the death scene.
I was like, what? She just like... she saw a ghost and died, so like she just died of fright.
In the exact literal terms of it, scared to death.
Yeah.
She had a fear-induced heart attack, and
yeah, it just doesn't. I don't know.
Okay, I get it. Maybe it seems a little lame, right? I can kind of see your point of view, but I actually expected her to die in somewhat of a lame way because she seems so afraid of the house, but was afraid to acknowledge the haunt, and like, oh, you silly Billy, it's just words on a page kind of thing. You knew she was always like, oh, I scare easy, right? So I thought the death scene was kind of, you know, appropriate for her character.
And then the old lady just bites it.
Yeah, another one just bites the dust.
Yeah. And then the third kill is the hammer smash face, you know, Cannibal Corpse style.
Right, and then like, you know, the other girl just has a heart attack.
Yeah. So it's just like it's very. Yeah, they're all over the place in that movie.
Right, so the rot though, right? So we're thinking, because you made a good point that it kind of seemed like it was spreading throughout the house.
Yeah.
When you mentioned it yesterday, right?
Yeah, like I think it's like maybe it's like Polly's presence. Like that's what I initially took was like it's the ghostly presence in the house.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like an. I don't know. Maybe there's more to it. Like maybe it itself is some kind of ghostly entity, and maybe like that's what drove the guy to kill Polly in the first place. I don't know, something like that. Maybe.
I mean, it's a neat idea.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess what I wanted to kind of explore with the idea of the rot is the house almost seems like it's some kind of like Stephen King entity, you know, it's like alive, and it's like it's spreading its rot to like everyone who's in it.
Yeah.
And even in the scene where she's touching the flowers, and the flowers are like, "This is where you rot," you know, or like, what? So that the house is kind of like, I'm maybe not forewarning her, maybe warning her because she seems so oblivious to what's going on. You'll float too, you're a rat too. I thought that was kind of a neat idea with the rot. So, I don't know, did you kind of get that take on it? Or?
Yeah, well, I didn't kind of want to jump like both feet into that pool, but like that was I was wondering, like, is the rot symbolic of something bigger, or is that just Polly's presence? That was kind of, it was more of a question for me. It wasn't like a definitive, you know.
Right, and I guess we may not actually know, and
Yeah.
maybe it's supposed to be played aloof like that by the director, so we can kind of take it as we want, I suppose. One last thing I think we should touch on before we bring it to an end is the beautiful camera movement in the house, right? So earlier on we kind of talked about the idea that we don't know the time elapsing. Kind of like, it's also a bit of that sense in Blackcoat's Daughter too, right? I think we see it more in Pretty Thing. And I love how he uses the circular motion of the camera constantly around the house. And to me, it's like almost like the illusion of time. It's like we are in this circle, but we don't know how much time is elapsing. What's like how?
Okay, you're like,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, like the orbit kind of symbolism.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
And I thought
that's interesting.
I thought he did that really well with just the circular motions of the camera, and even when Polly finally, I guess, you know, kills Lily, it's the same thing. She's following her through the house, and you just see the camera just following Lily, and I thought it was so scary because she's walking backwards following her. She doesn't even know at all until she turns around and fucking has a heart attack and dies. So I thought like that kind of, the cinematography was really neat. I like that a lot. Like that kind of like I don't know what time has passed and where we are in the timeline, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of disassociation, I guess is maybe the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think so.
So before we wrap it up, I kind of want to talk about what your favorite part is from either film and my favorite part from either film, just to have some fun.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So what's your favorite part? It's probably from Pretty Thing, I'm imagining.
Well, I can pick a favorite part from each.
Okay,
maybe.
yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
I'm going to say, you want me to go first?
Yeah, go first.
Okay, so I'll say my favorite scene from Blackcoat's Daughter is when the cop comes in at the end and says, you know, like, put down the weapon, and she's like, "Hail Satan!" And I did not expect her to shout that. I thought it was awesome because the movie is so calm and so quiet, and there's so little dialogue, right? And it's just this huge scene of her yelling, "Hail Satan!" I was like, how satisfying was that payoff? So what do you think?
My favorite scene from Blackcoat's Daughter is when she's on the phone and the demon is just like, "Kill all the cunts."
you wouldn't expect that language in an old female cast.
Yeah, like it's just so out there because there's no like profanity in the movie at all. I don't think.
No, there's not. I think she uses cunt again when she kills the nuns with like a serrated fucking blade.
But like other than that, that's it. That is brutal. It's like a bread knife kills. Yeah.
She's like sawing their heads off, and and to talk about how there's no swearing in the movie, there was no real violence in the movie, and all of a sudden it's like crazy. Kill.
It's out of the blue. Yeah.
That was very satisfying too. Okay, so for Pretty Thing, do you have a favorite scene?
Kind of.
Okay, so I kind of want to hear yours first before I tell you mine.
Okay, 100%. My favorite part of Pretty Thing is actually the intro monologue, and then like how it cuts into her talking, but her like it's narrated over her still face, and then she like smiles at the camera. Like to me, it's kind of unsettling because you know it's her talking, but like she's not moving her mouth, and then it just came from this haunted house monologue. So for me, the first like 2 minutes is the best part of the movie.
I like how because you mentioned they look at the camera. I like how they how Perkins breaks that fourth wall, and he has them all look at the camera. I'm like, ooh, it's unsettling in a sense. Honestly, I'm going to tell you, and you're probably going to be surprised at this. My favorite scene is, I already mentioned it because I thought the filming was so fantastic, was the final scene where well, not the final scene, but the final scene of her life, where you just see the ghost walking backwards, following her through the freaking house, and the whole time I'm like, oh my god, when is she going to turn around and see that this ghost is following her? And I was like, oh my goodness, here it comes, she's gonna die, this is what we've been waiting for the whole movie, is she's gonna die. So I thought that was like a really good payoff, and I was pretty satisfied watching that part.
What?
You're just like, nah, I don't share that.
I think what I was just thinking is that Perkins, even the way he does a ghost haunting you, is slow paced. Like with it following her around the house, like it's not like Poltergeist breaks out of the wall and is like screaming in her face. It's just like, stalking behind her and just for like a minute and a half.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It's that kind of, again, building that intensity. Yeah. And you're feeling it. You're like, oh my gosh, this ghost is following her, and then boom, and you get that release.
Yeah, he's great at building dread, like for sure. Like that's my take from both films, is they both have just this constant aura, like, subtle humming of dread the entire time.
Absolutely. His films are, and again, that's reinforcing the idea of this atmospheric horror that Osgood Perkins loves to do. And honestly, I think he's such a master at his craft. His work is like art, and he builds that gothic kind of atmospheric horror so well. That slow burn, that dread, that intensity, right?
Yeah, I just think that Gretel and Hansel is like a big step away from that style. Like his themes and stuff stay the same, but stylistically it feels a lot more like a Hollywood movie and less of like a Blumhouse or A24 type thing,
So maybe that's a good spot to leave it. And we will have to pick this up at another time because that is a whole other conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay, well, this has been the GUADCAST. This is our first attempt at doing this, so we're gonna see how it does. We're probably once a month, maybe.
We're hoping to, yeah. I think that's a good effort.
Yeah, we'll cover a topic. Probably may not always be two films. It may be a theme or
a specific director, even.
Yeah. Initially, our concept for this was Oz Perkins, but we thought all three movies would be too much to digest in 1 hour.
Yeah.
So we went with that, the two, for now. But yeah, so we've got a couple more ideas that we're probably gonna go on with.
So we hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in, and I guess we'll sign off there.
Yeah, if you have anything to say, any suggestions, maybe you'd like to hear us discuss on the show, you can leave a comment down below, or you can find me on Slasher, the social media app for horror fans, at PlaidPagan as well. Feel free to add me on there, and it's a great platform, and you can send me messages there. Okay, everyone, have a good night. Be good to each other. Stay safe.
And the audio is recording?
Not yet.
You didn't get that at all, did you?
So it's gonna be an audio sync of 3, 2, 1. Fuck your mother. But yeah, I can't speak.
It's okay, there's just so much to say.
I,
The old lady just bites it. Oh, fuck. I almost fell off the fucking chair.
okay,
We're almost done anyways. And then we can cry about this fucking... how hard this first podcast is.
sucker fuck.
So you were just saying, sucker fuck. We were talking about the rot. So I was saying, yeah, it's a neat idea, and then I'm gonna fucking say, no one gives a shit what you were actually saying. I'm gonna tell you what I want to say.